There are a few offenses in Dynasty Fantasy Football that I think are currently some of the best values you can go to. I mean, we talk about stacking all the time, making that one consolidated bet on an offense that you think will outperform what the Dynasty market is predicting. And hell, if you get that right, you probably get a bump up with the quarterback, with the running back, with the receivers. And I'm going to be excited to dive into. And I don't know how people are overlooking this offense now. Everything starts with the quarterback play. So we will get to the quarterback just 1 second. But of course, please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, leave a comment letting me know what offense that you like for Dynasty that maybe we didn't cover here. And of course, it's cost adjusted. I mean, if I wanted to come out and say, you know what? Yeah, probably a pretty good idea to go out of our way and to get the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's go get Joe Burrow. Let's go get T. Higgins. Let's go get Jamar Chase, and let's go get Joe Mixon. Yeah, I mean, in theory, it's great, but good luck paying those prices. Now, I will say, the quarterback position, if you're wanting to target this team, and you don't have to target every single player here, you can pick and choose. But the quarterback will be expensive. The quarterback is going to be going in round one of Dynasty leagues, and he is surprisingly young. Now, if you're looking at the fact that he took over as a starter right away his rookie season, and he's played pretty much throughout the entire year, every single year of his NFL career, except this last one, it seems like he should be significantly older than 24 years old. He's actually younger than someone like Joe Burrow, but you're getting him later in startup drafts. We'll talk about this in 1 second. You're usually getting him, according to Keep Trade Cut, around pick 9. This is someone that has rushing upside, and if you look at the passing production, he has become a more efficient passing quarterback and a more productive quarterback overall over the past 3 seasons on a per game basis. His rookie season, I mean, it wasn't the best. Of course, it wasn't Zach Wilson. It wasn't Trevor Lawrence. It wasn't Justin Fields level bad, but he did come out here and he had 6.6 adjusted yards per pass attempt, 232 passing yards per game. Then he progressed his sophomore year, 7.1 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt, getting that slight tick up, and then also 248 passing yards a game in this final season. Now, keep in mind, these numbers are going to be a little bit skewed because he left a game early with an injury. Now, I'm not going to try to fix this. We're not going to remove that game from the sample, even though you could. He averages 270 passing yards a game and at the same time, 7.9 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt. So he is a younger quarterback than Joe Burrow. And of course, Joe Burrow is everyone's top 5 favorite quarterback, and you're looking at Burrow a year older, averaging 288 passing yards in Cincinnati, right there in line with what we had from this guy. And on top of it, Joe Burrow doesn't have the same rushing upside. Now, I know everybody's screaming in the comment section, it's Kyla Murray. Obviously, it is Kyla Murray here. And what's interesting is if we go through and we look at just the tale of 2 seasons that the Arizona Cardinals had, I mean, you clearly can see the line with where Kyla Murray was injured. If we go through and we look at the first 8 games before the injury, you actually get that number bumped up to 285 passing yards per game for Kyla Murray during that stretch. That's a half a season sample, and that's right in line with what you had from Joe Burrow, but you are getting the rushing upside on top of it. We've seen Kyla Murray have double-digit rushing touchdowns before. He's younger than Burrow. I love me some Kyla Murray. Kyla Murray right now, according to Keep Trade Cut, going behind Lamar Jackson, going behind Burrow. I think you can make an argument for a couple different quarterbacks as your quarterback 4. I honestly think it comes down to Deshaun Watson and Kyla Murray. And before we get over to these skill positional players, I want to acknowledge that you have a couple options leaving this offense this offseason. Now, you are going to have no Chase Edmonds. You are going to have no Christian Kirk. And the combination of these 2 players are leaving behind 156 targets, 116 carries, and almost 2,000 total yards. Pretty much exactly 1,900 total yards are being left. And it doesn't stop there because obviously we can say, okay, well, Hopkins as well as Hollywood Brown, 2 players we'll talk about in a second, are probably going to be picking up that slack. But I also think you are going to see some of the volume leave AJ Green and Zach Ertz. You're looking at AJ Green as a wide receiver that is turning 34 years old this season. AJ Green is going to be 34 before the season even starts. Obviously, a Hall of Fame wide receiver, one of the better wide receivers I have ever seen, but the man's going to be 34. This isn't a Larry Fitzgerald type situation where he's going to stick around forever and be a thorn in our side. And last year, he had 92 targets. He had 848 receiving yards as well. So we can assume that that volume actually probably leaves AJ Green, maybe goes to someone like a Rondale Moore that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And obviously, they add Trey McBride, but if we're looking at Zach Ertz has been one of the least efficient tight ends in the entire NFL over the past 3 seasons, and he is turning 32 years old this upcoming season. He had 81 targets and 574 receiving yards last year. So I want to say, based on the continued development of Kyla Murray, and on top of that, the targets and the overall volume that should be available into this offense based on the players leaving and 2 guys that are getting probably a little too old to handle it all. Oh my God. I think that this offense is going to become a little bit more concentrated than we're used to seeing in years past. And I think you can profit off of it, starting at the running back position. Now, we just got done talking about this. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but James Conner, one of the best trade targets that you are going to find for a contending roster. Now, if we go and look at James Conner, one of my favorite things is going to be the contract. Yes, he was drafted in 2017. He's on his 3rd deal. You don't love a running back that just signs their 3rd contract, but you're not drafting James Conner thinking that you have him for the next 4 seasons. Anybody that goes out and gets James Conner in Dynasty, it's almost baked into his price that you have James Conner for this year and hopefully next year. I mean, that's kind of what you're trading for at this point. I mean, if you're looking at keep, trade, cut, right now, James Conner is currently being valued lower than James Cook, lower than Ezekiel Elliott, right ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Miles Sanders. So I think it's fair to say that you're looking at that 1 to 2 year time horizon for Conner based on the market. But if you look at that second season that he is going to have for 2023, he has $10 million guaranteed. $10 million guaranteed that season, and especially when they're about to have to give a massive contract over to Kyla Murray, and they're probably going to have to extend Hollywood Brown. We'll talk about him in just 1 second. They're not going to be able to go through and replace James Conner in 2023. Don't get me started about Keontae Ingram. I was at the University of Texas with Keontae Ingram. I don't see what the hype is about. This is a 6th round drafted rookie running back. You can go out there. You can try to find the next Elijah Mitchell. You can try to find the next James Robinson. I'm telling you, you're probably not going to be able to. Ingram isn't really anything other than a compliment to Benjamin in case something were to happen at the running back position, because you can't have Benjamin just as the standalone guy in this backfield. Now, you kind of see this with drafters on Underdog Fantasy. They know James Conner is in an elite level offense. They are taking James Conner as the running back 15. Now, of course, it's a redraft format. So yes, James Conner should have a lower value, a lower evaluation in Dynasty on Keep Trade Cut than Underdog Fantasy. But on Underdog Fantasy, where every single draft is a real money league, where every single draft is completed by people that are at least 18 years old, you have James Conner going about 13, 14 picks ahead of Ezekiel Elliott. You have him going ahead of Cam Akers as well. And if you ask me, if Ezekiel Elliott has more of a long-term guarantee than James Conner based on the contracts of the 2 players, I don't really think so. I think both running backs are guaranteed their jobs for this season and next season. After that, we don't really know with Ezekiel Elliott at this time. So why am I going to be paying the premium on Zeke in Dynasty if redraft players are saying, hell, James Conner probably is going to have more production this season, which I agree with. Now, of course, before we get to the rest of this, if you have not done so already, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up, and they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. I know y'all have seen this, but we are drafting there pretty much every single day on the live streams on our other channel. You can get in a draft with us. You can get in a draft with your friends, get in a draft in public lobby, have some fun in your life. Go sign up with promo code FLOCK. You can find the link in the description. But let's move on. During a 6-game stretch where we had no Chase Edmonds last year, this is weeks 9 through 14 and week 17 as well, we had James Conner come out and not only continue to dominate in the red zone, but he actually picked up the slack in the receiving game that Chase Edmonds left behind. It was a night and day difference with his role because they used Chase Edmonds as that third down running back, where James Conner at one point of the season was averaging more touchdowns than targets. More touchdowns than targets because Chase Edmonds was a great pass catching running back. Now he doesn't have to deal with that. He actually averages 16.5 carries, 5.5 targets a game during this stretch. He averages over 100 total yards a game. And during that 6-game sample, he had 10 total touchdowns. So I love me some James Conner for a multitude of different reasons for these contending teams, especially if you think that this offense is going to be able to bounce back with Kyla Murray, which I personally think so. But let's move over to the wide receiver position, because obviously it's not that smart to be going through and just automatically stacking James Conner on every team you have Kyla Murray. I will say they probably eat into each other's upside just slightly, given the fact that you're really drafting Kyla Murray as that first-round pick in a Superflex league, hoping that you have that rushing touchdown upside, which could vulture James Conner. But if we're going over to the wide receivers, we're going to start it off with Hollywood Brown, about to be 25 years old. What's really funny is if you look at Hollywood Brown in that same draft class as guys like A.J. Brown, as DK Metcalf, Hollywood Brown had a better 2021 season. I am not saying Hollywood Brown is a better wide receiver. Go pull up our Dynasty rankings. You're going to see that I have Metcalf, I have A.J. Brown ranked ahead of Hollywood, despite them having worse quarterbacks. But still, I want to get that on the record. He's only going to be 25 years old this upcoming season. Hasn't even turned 25 yet, but he is about to, right around the corner. Right now in Dynasty, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 28 on Underdog, a redraft format. He's about to turn 25. Right now, he's 24. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 18. So you are getting a discount on him in those Dynasty formats. And I'll say Underdog Best Ball, you could imagine with Hollywood Brown having higher average depth of target, maybe the boosted volatility helps him a little bit more in that format. But still, you're seeing that drafters over there are really baking into this offense that Kyla Murray is going to be able to elevate a multitude of different weapons. And I have to apologize yet again. We've said this probably 5 times now. I've made this apology, but it's what I have to do if I'm going to be someone going out there and live streaming. The second something happens, the second Hollywood Brown got traded to Arizona, I turned on the live stream. I said, you know what? Hollywood Brown, a deep threat wide receiver. This isn't going to change too much. He really doesn't command the volume in his offense, and instead he just opens up the rest of the field for everybody else. I was wrong. I was moronic. I really embarrassed myself. I embarrassed myself with that take, because if you go through, if you look at Hollywood Brown, this is a wide receiver that was the wide receiver 17 last year. And was it with his efficiency? No, it was not at all. He was playing with Tyler Huntley for a good portion of the season. Tyler Huntley, if you looked at an adjusted yards per pass attempt basis, was one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL last year. Like, Tyler Huntley is a worse passer than Teddy Bridgewater. I will tell you that right now. And Hollywood Brown posted the wide receiver 17 season by dominating targets in an offense that had Mark Andrews. He actually averaged over 9 targets a game, which was good for 25.34% of his team's target share. That puts Hollywood Brown as a wide receiver 1, a top 12 option in terms of target share at the NFL level. Now, the efficiency wasn't necessarily there. He only had 0.37 for his touchdowns per game, which was good for a 4.11% touchdown rate, but it was because he was playing with Tyler Huntley for a large portion of the season, and Lamar Jackson isn't as good as Kyla Murray. I will say that real quick, because let's go back and let's revisit what we had with Kyla Murray. Keep in mind, Kyla Murray, a younger quarterback, I believe, than Lamar Jackson. Let me confirm. Yes, they're about the same age, but still, we're making a point here. So with Kyla Murray, you end up getting him to have 7.9 for his adjusted yards per pass attempt, and on top of that, as we said, 285 passing yards a game through that 8-game stretch before the injury. Lamar Jackson's career high passing yards per game, just season high, pick a year, 240. So you are getting Hollywood Brown coming over to an offense that has a better quarterback play. In his previous offense, he was already a wide receiver 2 based off of a volume, which we know is predictive really season to season. I'm excited about Hollywood. Now, if we're talking about wide receivers that he is being valued next to in Dynasty, right now he's being valued neck and neck with someone like Sky Moore. I would personally trade Sky Moore for Hollywood Brown. I would trade someone like Amari Cooper. I'd trade, oh my God. Here's what you got to do right now. today, if you have Sutton on your team, somehow, some way, you watch this channel and you still have Courtland Sutton and you can't trade him for Jerry Jeudy, even if you had a second round pick, go try to trade Courtland Sutton for Hollywood Brown. If that doesn't get it done, say, hey man, I'll add a second on for you. Give me Hollywood. That would be such an easy move for me to make. Now, I will say you are not going to get Hollywood Brown with 25% of his team's targets in Arizona. It's not going to happen. The offense is not that condensed. And also he's playing next to a target hog in DeAndre Hopkins. Now, he can still be highly profitable if he bumps up the efficiency from Baltimore. Target share comes down slightly, better quarterback play, more efficiency overall in a higher volume offense. I still think he can smash, but he's not going to be averaging 25% of this team's target share. But with DeAndre Hopkins, this is a wide receiver that obviously has just been falling like a rock for great reason. For great reason. I was actually labeling DeAndre Hopkins as a buy low candidate at the beginning of the offseason, and I've had to continuously move him down our rankings because to get popped with the PED suspension when you are going into your age 30, 31, it's not good. It's not a good sign for DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe it shows that he's worried that he cannot stay healthy. So you've seen DeAndre Hopkins go from 2 years ago being a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty to now being valued as the wide receiver 44. DeAndre Hopkins is a wide receiver 4 in Dynasty. Now, if we look at his 2021 season, it was disappointing for a multitude of reasons. I will say, I want to give him the injury pass. I truly do. As you're looking at DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver that clearly is playing through injuries. I mean, if you go throughout his entire NFL career, you are getting 16 games played, 16 games played, 16, 16, 16, 16. Like, it's ridiculous to see how consistent Hopkins has been. We labeled him as one of the safest wide receivers last year. Clearly that was wrong. I want to blame it on the injury, but I don't know if we can, because you look at 2019, he averages exactly 10 targets a game. You look at 2020, he averages 10 targets a game. You just go beyond that. This is a wide receiver that's had 160, 150, 163, 174, 151, 192 targets every year since 2015. He's been a target hog, but you see the drop down in 2021. Comes down to 6.4 targets per game. You see the receiving yards per game come down from being historically around 85 to 90 to 57. You see him finish as a low-end wide receiver too. Now, what saves him? What saves him is that touchdown rate. He actually averages 12.5% of his targets turning to touchdowns, but his career average is nowhere near that high. I mean, I can promise you, he is not going to have a double-digit touchdown rate yet again this upcoming year. That number is going to come down. It cannot afford to come down for DeAndre Hopkins. With Hopkins, it's not really fair to look at his underdog ADP because he's going to miss the first 6 games of the season. What I will say is I'm unsure it's a great idea to go trade for DeAndre Hopkins today, just because nothing can really happen to increase his dynasty trade value. Now, of course, if you're able to make an easy deal, if you're able to go through and say, move a 2023 second and third round pick, yeah, you're making that deal today for Hopkins, but I doubt many owners are going to be sending him over to you for that. I would probably prefer to wait about a month into the season, evaluate how Kyla Murray looks, and whenever, say we're 3-4 weeks in, people will have not heard the DeAndre Hopkins name, and you find this every single year. It's crazy. But players that we know are going to miss the beginning of the season, even though we know he's not playing through the first 6 weeks, his dynasty value, while in theory it should go up just ever so slightly every week that passes until he is back, it's kind of the opposite. Just because he is out of the room, just because he's out of the limelight, it goes down ever so slightly. I think what we do is we wait to see how Kyla Murray looks. If Kyla looks great a month in, I think you can probably pay the same price for DeAndre Hopkins then that you would today. Now, let's move to our last wide receiver. Someone else that I'm interested to know what you think we should do with him. This is a wide receiver that currently is being valued as the wide receiver 56 on Underdog, the wide receiver 52 in Dynasty leagues. I'm interested in Rondale Moore at this price point. Now, with Rondale Moore, this is a wide receiver that obviously has a massive red flag, and that's his size. And I will admit, I was saying you could easily go through and draft Rondale Moore last year because we were looking at the profile, someone that put up one of the best true freshman seasons ever in college football. And I was saying, well, look at that. Look at that breakout age. He declares early. He was dominant his freshman season. A lot of these boxes are getting checked. He's also an elite level athlete. While yes, I have to acknowledge the massive red flag that is his size and that he is that extreme outlier, I still think he's intriguing. And I do not think we baked it in nearly enough to his price. Like, look at what people are doing to Wan'Dale Robinson this offseason, a wide receiver that's probably more impressive from a production standpoint coming out of college, but he's going later in a worse rookie class because people are so burnt from Rondale Moore. I would be interested in going through and trying to move off of a mid-second round pick in this year's rookie class. Now, I think what we are going to be looking at in terms of the rookies is you cannot trade the pick if you have someone like George Pickens. You cannot trade the pick if you have someone like Jahan Dotson available to you on the board. But once we get down to the tier that you have with guys like John Mechie, David Bell, I still probably prefer over Rondale Moore. But once we get down to that John Mechie tier, once we get to Wan'Dale Robinson, it would be interesting to trade for Rondale Moore, hoping that this offense does bounce back as we expect. And then you could potentially, if you're not a long-term believer, flip before Hopkins comes back in. But honestly, Rondale Moore and DeAndre Hopkins play almost two completely different roles. So I'm very, very interested in Moore right now, but we'll see how this plays out. And of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock, supporting the channel. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope you got something from it. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. That's all I got for you. I really hope I get to see you with the video tomorrow, and I truly do appreciate you.